Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and with us today, we're very honored once again to have renowned litigator and outstanding political analyst, Robert Barnes. So, Robert, it's been a while since you've been on. A lot has happened since then. And just to kick things off, I'm obviously the whole world is curious about this Derek Chauvin trial. I mean, you're a experienced trial lawyer, so I'd be interested to see what your take is. The other day, Alan Dershowitz was on television, and he said that there are really two crucial aspects of this case, which is intent, which is what was going on in Derek Chauvin's mind when he had the knee on George Floyd's neck, in which case then the question arises, will the defense put Chauvin on the witness stand? The other issue is, of course, the causation. How much, if at all, did the knee on the neck cause George Floyd's death? The Sean Hannity's legal analyst, who's yeah, you know who I mean, Greg Jarrett. The guy is spectacular because if you remember during Russiagate, he would come on night after night on Hannity and predict imminent indictment of Peter Strzok, James Comey, McCabe, Lisa Page, Brennan. They would all be indicted, and he would go through details of all the charges that were forthcoming against these people. Of course, none of that has happened. But in any case, Jarrett's firm prediction is that, yes, the knee on the neck was the cause of Floyd's death. It doesn't matter about what was in his system, the fentanyl, the methamphetamine. If he hadn't put his knee on the neck, George Floyd would be alive today, which seems a strange argument. So anyway, Robert, what's your take?
So, well, three components. One is what I think the jury's going to do. Two is how this case is going to play out, I think, in the court of public opinion. But I'll go to the third first in terms of what I think actually happened and then what I think an honest jury would conclude, which is it appears that George Floyd had a major drug problem that had accelerated in the months leading up to the incident. That a year before, almost a year to the date, he had been pulled over. And when he got pulled over, he did a sudden ingestion of a massive lethal dose of drugs. In 2019, had to be rushed to the hospital, almost died. It appears, and then March of 2020, he had been, again, taking drugs that were not, prescription drugs. Apparently, it may have been constantly fentanyl. We don't know for sure. But he had OD'd again and had gone to the hospital for 5 days, just 2 months prior to this incident. And the way his girlfriend described his condition, frothing at the mouth, feeling stomach pain, was similar to what he would complain about on the day of the incident. So it appears what happened is when he saw the cops there, he panicked. It turns out he was in the car with his drug dealer. And so that would explain even further why he's panicking. The video from him being inside the store earlier, it appears that he was already hopping. He's like literally hopping and doing different things. We'll tell the cop that later on that he was hopping earlier. So that it appears that he was in the midst of a lot of drugs. And then when he saw the cop, he panicked, ingested a bunch more. They have both the photo of something that looks like that on his tongue. They now know that it was the drug dealer he was in the car with. They found saliva and evidence of spitting out part of that in the back of the police squad car. And in fact, he told the police, this came out yesterday, he would rather be on the ground than inside the car. He said that when an older African-American man was intervening and saying you can't win, he's like, oh, I'm not trying to win. I just can't be inside the car. I'd rather be on the ground. So that's why he ends up on the ground. Chauvin shows up. Chauvin sees someone acting crazy. That's what he told his sergeant, almost contemporaneously, that they think he's doing, that he's experiencing something with drugs, and that the only way to control him is just to stay on top of him. Then the crowd starts getting really agitated. People are screaming at him, cussing at him, yelling at him. And I think it triggered a panic mode. And I think he just said, okay, I'm just going to stay on top of him until the ambulance arrives. They called the ambulance very early on, and then they let the ambulance take care of it and just try to get out of here. I don't think there was any intention to kill him. I don't think he had any idea that he was dying. The further backstory is that these kind of training techniques are taught around the world. I mean, you can find them in Eastern Europe, Israel, other places. That won't stop the higher-ranking politically motivated police officers from lying to the jury like they are today, in fact, and say otherwise. But if you look at it, I mean, I've done these civil rights cases for 20 years. This is a pretty common hold in most parts of the country and most parts of the world. People can find YouTube videos of East European police officers saying, this is weird. We do this all the time. And the big thing for people to know about it is it almost never has caused death. That just started happening in the last 5 to 6 years, where lawsuits started happening in the States alleging severe injury. That's why police departments started backing away from it. But to give an example, in Minneapolis, they had done this hundreds of times during the time that Chauvin was a police officer. And about 1 out of 5 times, the person passes out. So seeing him passed out, you don't blink twice about it. But they've never died before. The other factor is it appears Chauvin was using his thumb for the pulse. And what that does is that you're actually measuring your own pulse if he did it that way. That came out yesterday. So he might have thought that he did still have a pulse when he didn't. So that's what I think fully happened. I think causation is that Floyd would have died that Floyd did not die due to the knee on the neck. There was no sign of damage to the neck, no sign of damage to the kind of things you would look for and expect in asphyxia. The doctor, before they got to him and gave him a special message, the coroner originally said, if this guy, you just brought him in, I would have said OD. That's what it looks like. And I think that's what it is. So I think that's what actually happened. I think Chauvin did panic, and the protocol is to flip him over once he's no longer resisting. He didn't do that. But I don't think he had any intention to kill him. Didn't think he was killing him on the intention side, and I don't think he caused the death. I think he may have been. I think most of the time he was had his knee on his back or neck. I think Floyd was already dead. Like the paramedic testified when he arrived, he believed he was already dead. I suspect he was 4 minutes in, and Floyd was saying he couldn't breathe all the way through. He was saying he couldn't breathe while he was going down. And there's something called wooden lung, that a particular form of ODing to the combination of the speedball he took, fentanyl and meth, because he was taking both. And the level was 3 times the lethal level of a dose of just fentanyl. And he had other things as well that are also lethal in combination, is that your lung collapses. They call it wooden lung. And what he seems to be physically describing is that's what he started to experience relatively early on. But because he had lied a lot at the beginning, because he was trying to buy time to get rid of the drugs, get rid of the counterfeit currency, he crumpled it up and put it in the car. They found it later. That's why he's not putting his hands on the wheel. That's why he's playing. That's why he's saying, oh, I'm afraid you're going to shoot me. That was mostly script, it turns out. That wasn't based on life experience. And it turns out Mama was his girlfriend. That was his nickname for his girlfriend. That's who he may have been talking about towards the end. So the media narrative about this case has been all false. 90% of it they have not covered. Now, I think from a court of public opinion perspective, if people want to see how motivated reasoning works, this case is a great example. The people who think he's guilty are only reporting evidence that favors their cause and spinning it in that direction. Ignoring, if you watch MSNBC, you wouldn't know 90% of what I just said, because they're not reporting it. They're only highlighting the evidence that favors the prosecution. Some degree, same true of the defense, but the defense has nowhere near the media impact that the prosecution has in their pocket. It's an unusual, it looks like a show trial. They've brought in, private lawyers from all across the country. This is unheard of in the United States. It's unheard of in most parts of the country. I mean, most parts of the world. Australia has its own thing, but they always hire private lawyers for both sides. Not in the U.S. They've brought in a dream team, a prosecutorial dream team. So they got, and Chauvin's got one lawyer paid for by the police union. So the mismatch is incredible. I would say from a jury presentation, it's an unusually diverse jury. Minneapolis is a 90, about an 87% white area. You would normally, in a typical Minneapolis jury pool or jury, you would have 1 African-American, 1 Asian, and 10 whites, 5 white men, 5 white women. Here you only have 2 white men on the entire jury pool, 6 African-Americans or mixed race. And then they're all young. Usually a jury in America in particular tends to be old people. Here, there's almost no old people. So they have a jury pool that probably 11 of the 12, there's 14 sitting, 2 alternates, but I think 11 of the final 12 will have voted for Joe Biden. And at least by polling information, they already believe that Chauvin is guilty. And most of the jurors that are sat on this jury believe Chauvin is guilty. That said so. Most analysts that have looked at this said at least 2/3 of the jury pool appears to lean guilty. So that's the big hurdle that Chauvin faces. And one of the ways they got off innocent-oriented jurors is they asked, do you fear the outcome of the acquittal? Do you fear something, or the verdict? Do you fear something bad might happen to you? Well, the only people who worry about that are people who are going to vote acquittal. And to give you an idea how bad it is in the States and how bad it is, especially in Minneapolis, you had about 1/3 of the jury pool say they didn't want to sit on the jury because they were afraid of what would happen to them after a verdict. So what that is that was a way to filter out the people that were for acquittal. So that's why it's probably a lynching jury in mindset mentality. And I think that's the one big hurdle Chauvin faces. The other one is in terms of actual presentation of argument. The prosecution did a much better job. They understand that human beings operate on the back of their brain. Chase Hughes for the behavior panel talks about this, on the unconscious part of their brain. And then the conscious part justifies and excuses what the unconscious part already decided. Another way to think of it is motivation is the master of reason. Reason's not the master of motivation. If you want to improve your reasoning, change your motivation. Well, in this context, the prosecution has played all to emotion. I mean, it's been the most emotional high pitch I've ever seen. It feels like a Soviet era or Cuban style show trial in the way it's presented. It doesn't feel like, hey, here's the evidence, here's the facts, here's the science, here's the law. Instead, it's you get up and cry, you get up and cry, you get up and cry. They have old people crying, young people crying, teenagers crying, men crying, women crying. I think professionals crying, MMA fighters crying, fireworkers fire. I mean, I think 8 of the first 9 jurors cried. I mean, it was unbelievable. I've never seen that. And I've been through a lot of crazy trials in my life. And the whole beginning of the prosecution was high pitch emotion with great use of visuals. Whereas the defense wants to be, we're going to think about reason and based on logic and based on fact. The myth of the American legal society that we're based on fact and law when we're not. Not jurors for sure, not judges, frankly. Either.
Would it have been possible for Chauvin to hire a crack defense attorney? Well, somebody like you, or I mean, for instance, George Zimmerman. Zimmerman had some pretty good defense attorneys. Were any good defense attorneys available who would have taken this case?
I think there would have been. I think that's an open question. I think they went with the local experienced criminal defense lawyer because they thought that was the best route to go. It's the union, so they probably would have paid some, but not a lot. If Chauvin had tried to raise money for his defense, it would have been shut down by every platform known to man. I represent Kyle Rittenhouse, and every time there's been any fundraising effort for him, they've tried to shut it down and chase down every platform. It is the case that lawyers would have been attacked if they'd represented Chauvin outside of Minneapolis. Nelson has got the lawyer for Chauvin has received some of those attacks, but nowhere near the scale that would have if somebody big had appeared. But I think he would have been better off with another additional defense counsel. Now, I think the thing with Chauvin was he was willing to plead from the get-go. He was willing to do 10 to 20 years even. Because they have him on tax charges. They have him on tax problems. They have him on potential corruption problems. Because if you're a cop and you're not filing tax returns, usually it's because you're receiving money, not only money under the table that you don't want to pay tax on, but the source of that under the table money might be problematic given you're a cop. So that usually spells corruption. And it was dear Bill Barr who blew it all up. Barr is the one who made sure this political show trial took place. He's turning out to maybe be the worst attorney general. I think he's going to beat out Palmer for the worst attorney general in American history. I mean, he's that bad. He's beat out John Mitchell too. Combined what he did. I mean, covering up for the Bidens, not doing anything about Spygate. Putting people in place that would do these politicized prosecutions on January 6th. And now with Chauvin is purely a show trial. They're overcharging him, and everybody knows they're overcharging him. They should have accepted the plea deal. That was a very fair sentence given the risk that was at place of acquittals. They're charging him with crimes he didn't commit legally. I mean, they're charging him with a felony murder that's only supposed to apply when you commit a felony other than the murder. Otherwise, every murder is felony murder. They're charging him with grossly reckless murder, which is supposed to be when you're causing danger to tons of people and you kill one person. Right. And the only charge he's guilty of, potentially, if you believe the intent and the causation, is second-degree manslaughter. And that's a lesser sentence than the one he was willing to plead guilty to. Right. So we're here just for a show trial. We're here so that the world can feel good about a public lynching, that America can feel good about a public lynching, that they can prove they can weaponize the prosecutorial power in America against their dissident opponents. It's a preview of what's to come with January 6th, or at least where January 6th was headed.
Just on that point, that third-degree murder, because that's what you were just talking about, that you're recklessly endangering many others. That's the charge they had against that Szamuely police officer. But in that case, he was recklessly endangering people around. Remember, he shot, he
didn't know what he was shooting. He was just shooting
past his colleague. Could have just simply
he could have shot his colleague. He could have shot anybody that happened to be in the neighborhood at the time. Right. This was like a drive-by shooting, which, by the way, of interest, they actually exclude drive-by shootings from the definition of second-degree murder, felony murder, which gives you an idea for where they thought that kind of thing should go. Yes, and it's solely so. There's never been a felony murder prosecution like this that I have ever heard of. Dershowitz said the same thing. He said the second-degree murder charge makes no sense. He said the third-degree murder charge makes no sense. He said this is a straightforward second-degree manslaughter charge. But the reason why they didn't go forward on just that is he was willing to plead to an even higher count. He would plead to the manslaughter count. Be done with this. Not go through the trial. Get rid of the tax stuff and just do his 5 to 10 years, which is the normal sentence for something like that. But it's because they want to show they want a legalized lynching. That's what this whole case is about from the prosecutorial perspective. Yeah. And they've already been caught hiding evidence, lying evidence. They were going to put a witness up that, like, for example, who they should have potentially investigated is the drug dealer who gave him the drugs. Because if the drug dealer gave him something that was laced heavily with just fentanyl and he didn't know it, and it appears from the girlfriend's testimony, they didn't know they were getting fentanyl, that means he could have been charged with reckless homicide himself. And instead, they were going to promote him as this truth-telling witness and try to hide that. And then his girlfriend outs him yesterday. Right. But it gives you an idea for the prosecutor. And the prosecutor, they're going to put cops up who are going to lie. The biggest problem from a cancel culture perspective, I think Chauvin will have nowhere near as strong as experts as the government will. The government's putting up like 8 doctors, which to me is cumulative at some point. But their excuses, they're all different expertise in different areas. Right. But the medical profession is eager to help lynch Chauvin. And so any medical professional who has the guts to testify for Chauvin in the Floyd case, I mean, this is a guy they're putting memorials inside Holocaust museums to. Yeah. How he fits into the Holocaust, I don't know, but that's, he's got memorials inside Holocaust museums. They're going to have a hard time in the battle of experts. The state is likely to win. The question is whether the jury can see through it.
So what about, would you put Chauvin on the witness stand?
No, not at all, because he's got a long bet. One of my criticisms of Chauvin early on was I said, if you want to infer intent, look at his history. In my experience as a civil rights practice, that if he has a long history of having complaints against him, chances are he has a habit of being reckless in these situations, that his default in cases of panic isn't to do no harm. His default is abuse his power, because that's what gets him out of a situation in certain circumstances. And he has 17 different complaints filed against him. The other thing that's going on here is they're trying to cover up the Minneapolis city's history of having questionable police training. They're trying to cover up the fact that that Klobuchar, when she was district attorney, helped cover up for another case involving Chauvin, where Chauvin would have been off the force had she done her job. And, at the time they were looking at charges, she was looking as being a potential leading presidential candidate. Yeah. So, because he's now Senator Klobuchar. So you have a lot of Democrat, and then you have whomever Chauvin was corrupt with. You have a lot of Democratic corruption that they're trying to keep a lid on, and they just want the old sin goat. You bring in the goat, you cast your sins on the goat, then you kill the goat. That's where the scapegoat phrase comes from. They want Chauvin to be a convenient scapegoat and they want a crazy sentence that's a legalized lynching so that nobody looks any further, and they can push their sort of Black Lives Matter narrative. That this is about racial abuse and racial misconduct. Whereas I have no doubt that if this Floyd had been white, Chauvin would have done the exact same thing.
But that's what I was thinking, that these 17 complaints may work to his advantage because it might show that some of them involved white suspects. And it just shows that's the way he normally does his policing. He wasn't driven by any racial animus toward Floyd. I mean, that's what he always does. So in a way, you know, his bad record could work to his advantage.
On that aspect, yes. But on the overall, they'll be like, okay, this guy defaults to a bad reaction. This guy doesn't default to a good reaction. He defaults, and that he got away with it in the past. So I think that's problem one. Problem two, in my experience, it's almost never good for the defendant to testify in his own behalf. I've done focus groups, mock trials, and then actual trials. But the mock trials, I get a lot of information and intel and feedback. And what generally happens is jurors who like your case don't want your client to testify, whereas jurors who don't like your case want your client to testify. And the reason is I call it going from book to film. In a book, every person reading that book can have a totally different image of a certain character. The moment they show up on film, you're going to disappoint 90% of the readers because they're going to be, that didn't fit what I thought they were like. And that's the way jurors respond. I mean, it's stunning. On almost no case that I've ever tested out was it better. Like in the Snipes case, I thought Snipes had to testify, you know, high profile actor, et cetera. The focus groups made it clear couldn't testify. One, everybody who was for him didn't want him to testify. Everybody who was against him did want him to testify. It became clear for that reason, but it was enhanced in his case because they're like, he's an actor. Anything he says that's credible, we're going to disbelieve because he's an actor. Anything he says that hurts him, we will definitely believe because he's an actor. It must be true. So I don't think Chauvin can testify. It would be way, way too risky. Normally, in these other cases, like the Diallo case, Rodney King case, the cops did testify, but they didn't have the same long history, and they had a bunch of cops testifying on their behalf. And they were good, too. I mean, they could cry on cue, all the rest. I don't know if Chauvin is as good as, even though he's been around a long time, I don't know if he's as good at that in presentation style. So I think it's more risk than reward if Chauvin testifies. Right.
So what's your prediction? He's guilty on all three counts or only one of them? What do you think?
I think I believe in emotional pitches. So I didn't like I thought the opening statement were going to be several hours apiece. In the Snipes case, we had a 2-week trial. Opening statements were 2 to 3 hours each on each side. They went, the prosecution went for an hour. Decent visuals, but not great. A legendary black civil rights lawyer. So he did a solid job, but could have done much, much better with the emotional power and potency of this case. And then the defense decided to go a totally different, we're going to make this real calm and rational, and we're going to read this like it's a technical police report. And just in my experience, that backfires. I thought they got behind the 8 ball, and if you lose, what they've done studies here in the States, and 80% of jurors make up their mind after opening statement. And if that's what happened here, I think it's about a 75% chance of conviction of at least one count, 50% chance of conviction across the board, depending on how they read the jury instructions. And I lean a little, I would say in terms of opening statements, I would lean towards guilt. In terms of what's happened at trial so far, I would lean towards acquittal. If you really did have jurors who are paying deep attention and were waiting to see for the evidence, which is very rare. But if that happens here, it'll be African-American male jurors leading the not guilty verdicts, by the way, which is an interesting component. It'll be a deep cognitive.
Why would they be leaning towards acquittal?
2 reasons, based on their answers pre-trial and because it's one of the great myths of misunderstandings of jury selection. So, like, for example, if you have a sexual assault case and the only thing let's say you're the defense lawyer and the accused is a young man about 25, the victim is a young woman about 25. And the only thing you know about the jury pool is gender and age. Then the most people would say, well, if I was a defense lawyer, I would pick other men to be on the jury pool. And maybe young men, maybe old men, depending on how they think the age will shake out. A lot of them say old men for a range of reasons. Whereas I would get rid of any young women. Those would be the worst jurors. It's actually the opposite. Young women jurors are the most pro-defense jurors in a sexual assault case. Old men are the most pro-prosecution jurors. Old men, you can figure out why. If they have daughters, if people have a reptilian brain, part of the reptilian side of the human brain, they tend to think survival. So they're sitting there and watching something. They think, how could I prevent this from happening to me? And like in a sexual assault case, the young woman thinks, I can't, the way I can prevent this from happening to me is not be like the victim. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have done this. So this will never happen to me. Whereas the father, he's like, I can't be there. So the only way I can do anything is to judge him. He shouldn't have done this. He shouldn't have done this. He shouldn't have done this. In the similar dynamics here, if I was the prosecution, I would not have picked a jury that looked like the victim. Because one way they can say what happened to George Floyd won't happen to me is they'll figure out all the ways they're not George Floyd. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have done this. And the best jurors would have been African-American mothers that would have seen their son, older mothers. There's only one such juror, though, on the whole jury pool. The prosecution said, oh, black juror, good. Multiracial juror, good. Didn't pay attention to race, to gender or to age or to biography or even to their answers. Several of the black male jurors that are smart, independent, professional types voice skepticism about the government's case. So that was a cue right away. They're also more likely to know that experience, to know what that life is, what that situation is like, how it can go AWOL, how you can prevent it from happening. So based on their answers and based on that victim dynamic of tending to judge the victim rather than judge the perpetrator, if it goes a acquittal jury, my guess is the foreman will be an African-American man. And that will create a cognitive dissonance in both the press and the political class here. They won't know what they're, hold on a second, that couldn't, so if he was supposed to be acquitted, it's supposed to be white guys leading the charge, part of the male patriarchy, part of the system, part of the secret racial oppression that needs critical race theory training for all our future jurors. What happens when it's a young African-American man, including African-American immigrants, who, by the way, the black immigrants have a very different perception of the world than do African Americans. I mean, when you dig in politically, not just Jamaicans, but Africans and others as well, just very different, distinct mindsets. But this prosecution appeared to be unaware of that. All they saw was skin color. The defense deliberately put a lot of these jurors on, which tells you they probably know something the prosecution doesn't.
So, but that would be interesting because it may well be that African-American men, in particular middle-aged men, might not be so intimidated by the absolute bedlam that will break out in the event of acquittal. They'll say, okay, do your bit. Whereas maybe the sort of younger women would be much more terrified of that and would be much more likely to vote for conviction. So would that be a factor?
Yeah, if I was the prosecution, I would have packed the jury with women, white women and black women, mothers in the case of black women. In the case of white women, people that would be particularly your middle class, wannabe liberal white woman who locks her door when she sees a black man on the street. That, who's got a lot of racial guilt going on. Something out of Thomas Wolfe's electric Kool-Aid test kind of personality. They would be eager to prove how virtuous they are to the world by lynching Chauvin. And so the good side for them is they didn't end up with a bunch of older white folks who are like, hey, we want the police to do whatever's necessary because we're scared of the crime in Minneapolis. That would have been the most pro-defense jury pool. But they also didn't end up with a real pro-defense because it's while it is more female than male, for sure, it has a lot of the men on it that are going to be hard in the jury room to resist. That's the other thing. In other words, what if I was on the prosecution side, I would be terrified of black male jurors who are against my position, because who is going to fight that juror in the jury room? Who's going to say, no, you don't understand. Yeah, okay, you're a black male, but you don't understand what the racial experience is in America. So it flips the script. And if this case goes with a surprising verdict, it will be for that reason, which will be very fascinating and revelatory at multiple levels of American society. But that's why it could go that way.
But of course, if it does go that way, then boom, the DOJ moves in with a civil rights violation suit, which is what happened after the Rodney King case. So either way, Chauvin is done. He's not going to.
Oh, correct. And he's got all the tax charges that probably have underlying corruption charges. So he's got state tax charges. He's got federal tax charges. Those are 5 to 7 years by themselves anyway. And the state's on top of the feds. So you don't get to do that time concurrent. So it'd be 5 to 7 on the federal side, 2 to 3 on the state side. You end up serving the same amount of time and your life is ruined anyway. Right. For Chauvin, that's why he was willing to cut a plea deal, to plead to even a higher charge than he was, a lot of lawyers looked at, said he could be found guilty of, because he's like, okay, I'm done to rights. And like I said, if they dig deeper, I'm sure there's corruption problems there lingering. So he knows he's done with. He just doesn't want a 40-year prison sentence. I mean, that's basically, he's fighting that top count that shouldn't even be charged in the case. Yeah. And that's why I say it's almost entirely a show trial.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, so let's then segue into Biden. Now, there's something that's baffling me, and it's, we've discussed it on the gaggle, which is what we know about Biden. I mean, he's been around for decades, from the 1970s, is that he's always been a centrist Democrat, a liberal Republican. He was a kind of a New Deal, not a New Deal, a New Democrat, really, even before Bill Clinton. So, and after all, we know him famously from the crime bill, 1994. He was the sponsor of that, and right now he's going against all of that. He's abandoning the ending welfare as we know it. I mean, because essentially with this thing, aid to families with dependent children is now coming back. This was the great achievement of the Clinton-Gingrich era. He's going ahead with a massive spending thing. I mean, there's the infrastructure bill, and that seems to be just the first tranche. I mean, $2 trillion, and then there's going to be a Green New Deal. That's another few trillion. AOC was saying, let's make it 10 trillion. I mean, I doubt it's going to go up to 20 trillion. So he's going back on all of that. Now, is it Biden himself? Is it that he wants to be in a way like the LBJ to JFK? That's like he's going to outdo everything that JFK did. He'll be the great reformer. Or is it that he's not really running the show? Is it that Obama is maybe running the show behind the scenes? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's a combination. I mean, Biden was an old school Democratic machine politician, and he came from that institutional wing of the Democratic Party. And I describe him to people as think of like a 1950s mayor of New York. And that's why he has no political core. He has no, I mean, he basically just goes with wherever the wind vane leads him. Okay, hey, this is hot, we'll do that. Oh, okay, that's hot, we'll do that. Always been a corporatist and an institutionalist at heart. Never been a radical by any stretch. And the only big legislation he's ever proposed, it was the crime bill, the first Patriot Act in 1995. It just didn't go through. Right. And now he's got a new one for the new domestic terrorist threat. Right. But he's basically going to be an effective figurehead who will do what deep state operators want. And that's why you're seeing such wildly conflicting policies everywhere, because they're power driven. That shadow of the Kissinger shadow book, which describes his kind of imperialistic existentialism, people who simply take action solely to take action. That, oh, yes, we've taken action today, and this means something. And that's why you're seeing like policies that make no sense. Like, okay, we're going to get out of Yemen, but we're going to continue to sell the weapons to Saudi Arabia. We're going to cut a new deal with Iran, but now we're going to accelerate actually more against Iran. Right. We're going to we're not going to be as active in Syria. No, we're going to double down in Syria. Right. Maybe we'll get out of Afghanistan. No, actually, we're going to break our deal and be there past May 1st.
And Russia as well, we'll renew the New START treaty, but we'll be extremely hostile to Russia.
Yeah, we'll call their leader a killer, mass killer.
Exactly.
We're going to do a different deal than Trump in terms of China, but actually we're going to accelerate with China and do things with Taiwan and say Australia's in with us and go on our moral lecture tour. I mean, these people think like Victorian, late 19th century British Empire, that, there's the self-justification and rationalization for their empire imperialistic proclivities, but they actually believe in this moral self-righteous gibberish. And it's striking. And they don't understand, guys like Blinken really came up in the 90s and they still think the world is the 90s, when the whole world, because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was only one power and we were able to do whatever we wanted. And he still thinks it's that way. And he thinks he can come up with whatever sort of, these are people, like say, always grew up on the TV show West Wing, because that was popular in the 90s. When I was a young intern for the Clinton White House, the very first year after the Clinton White House was there, saw a lot of interesting stuff. It's another story for another day, but educated me on Clinton very, very fast. Interned for the AFL-CIO and then got to see things really up close. And that's why I made my friendship with Ralph Nader and some other people. But the dynamic is Biden's not going to run anything. He's just purely a press spokesperson. He's just purely a figurehead. And I think who's running it is even beyond Obama, because Obama goes back and forth between his ego wanting public attention to wanting to smoke pot and play video games. And he can't figure out which one he is on a given day, or maybe just go party with Richard Branson on some island and cash in. I mean, he and his wife really cashed in. People, attacked Reagan for getting like $1 million a speech. Exactly. Nothing like what the Obamas have done. They're even putting the Clintons to shame. I mean, he'll sit on any board, sell any book, to give any speech for just cash. He's going to have like 8 houses when he's done. He's going to definitely outdo Bernie, but Bernie will never be able to exceed the number of houses Obama's got. So I think that whole dynamic is that Biden is just a spokesperson. There is an ego part. If they're smart, they would, say, you could be bigger than FDR. You could be bigger than Lyndon Baines Johnson. You could have the Great Society ×2. You could have the New Deal. That's the new deal, all that jazz. And I'm sure that's what they're pitching to him in between, milk and cookies and nap time. And please don't let your dog bite and poo everywhere. But it's a sign of a decaying empire that we even have this guy as our president. I mean, I've never seen anyone like him. It was why when I was during the betting, I was like, I got to lean towards Trump because while there's all these anomalies that Trump has to face, we've never had a guy that's, a derelict dementia candidate as our president. I mean, Woodrow Wilson lost it, but nobody knew. I mean, that happened in 1919. This guy, they're scared of a press conference, a single press conference where they give him a comic book to go through and ask people questions with little color photos. So and even then he screws it up. Says he's been in the Senate for 120 years. Says other stuff that you can tell his fuse. They can't keep that fuse covered up. But throughout the campaign, he would light into some old guy, blue collar guy. I mean, not even powerful people. He'd light into anybody. That's why they stopped.
But that in a way is a sign of dementia. Your old people get furious. They get absolutely angry. I mean, normally you'd say, okay, calm down, granddad. But it's a regular thing with him. But it's a part of the Democrats' cynical maneuver, because ultimately they knew nobody running that in 2020 was going to beat Donald Trump. I mean, that's why they maneuvered everything to give it to Biden, because only Biden would be able to pull it off, even though they could see that he was out of it. I mean, you could see they were laughing at him when he was on stage. So it was really a very cynical maneuver to get him into that position.
No doubt. And I think that to go back to your core question as to who's running the show, I told people that if Biden picked Kamala Harris as his vice presidential candidate to run with him, then he wasn't running anything at all. Because old Biden would have never rewarded someone who smacked him in the face and stabbed him on the back in the back on a public stage. That's not old school political machine politics. So when he picked her, I was like, wow, he's purely a figurehead. He's just a puppet to put up on stage a couple hours a day. He's like Boris Yeltsin toward the end in Russia. They always remember him. There was Conan O'Brien had an original one where he put different people's mouths in their faces. And he always had Boris Yeltsin saying, did someone say la 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 liquor? That's what I always think of. I think of Boris Yeltsin. It's a version of that with Joe Biden. And so the deep state's running foreign policy, but we have a dangerously incompetent, not just morally misdirected deep state, but dangerously intellectually inept deep state. Yes. Yep. And then it's the Wall Street Fed crowd that's running economic policy. And right now they really believe in MMT. Yes. They really believe in modern monetary theory, that you can print your way out of any problem. Boy, the Soviet Union would have liked to have known that. Yeah, that would have been nice if printing just solved all your problems. There's a lot of countries that'd be okay right now.
Right. No. I mean, that's it. When AOC says, well, I don't think 2 trillion is enough. I want 10 trillion. Then, well, why stop at 10 trillion? I mean, let's make it 40 trillion. I mean, 100 trillion. If you could just simply print it all, then
yeah, let's send everybody a $1 trillion bill.
Right.
Why not? Send them all a $1 trillion bill. It worked for Zimbabwe. So you had little kids walking around with $1 billion bills. I mean, it usually always ended bad, but it's part of this culture of the what Peter calls the professional managerial class. Yeah. On both foreign policy and economic policy, they run the show here. And particularly on the democratically aligned side, but really on both sides ideologically and politically. Trump was AWOL, but everyone around him had these same dumb ideas that they think you can that they are sort of uber gods. It's much like Kennedy's people, the best and the brightest, the Harvard crowd, all the rest. That, yeah, we can go into Vietnam and win when no one else has, when the French just got run off, when this is a history of a disasters. Just like they thought they could go into Afghanistan and win. It's like, how many empires have to lose over how many centuries before you realize you're not going to win there? That's not going to work.
Right.
And yet there we are. We're still there. We're still going to be there.
That's
I
right.
mean, the April Fool's joke was the Defense Department put out an announcement that they would, in fact, finally pull out of Afghanistan. And it said that that's an April Fool's joke, but it was because of the circumstances and situation that we face. So I think for people to understand Biden, he's just a spokesperson. There'll be some stuff where they talk into him for ego purposes, but I don't think he's exercising any restraint or restriction on anybody. There's a part of him that's still in torture chamber from the Obama years. That's why he keeps calling himself vice president. Right. From all Obama's beatdowns psychologically over 8 years. He's like that character from Game of Thrones that can't even use his own name anymore. There's a part of Biden that is that way. Right. And so I think that's why his wife often is more speaks out more than he does. Right. But Harris is kind of the power behind the throne. But I think that even goes beyond Obama. This is the institutional deep state. These are the think tanks running the show, the CIA, the high ranks of the national security state apparatus running the show, the professionals at the State Department and the Pentagon and the Fed. They're running the show. And it's a very dangerous, precarious show because they're taking unprecedented gambles we never have with both our domestic and foreign policy.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if we're looking at what's going on now in Ukraine, this is spiraling out of control. Now, we've had tense times during the Cold War, but you still have some sensible people at the top. Like in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I mean, Kennedy was really the sensible person. Not the people around him, but Kennedy was the sensible one, because the people around him, they wanted to invade Cuba. I mean, they were ready to go in then and there and dismantle the missiles and everything. I mean, so he was the one who held back. And was a sensible one. But at the moment, it doesn't look like there's anyone sensible. And it's the tension now in Ukraine is ratcheting up and ratcheting up and ratcheting up. And it doesn't look like there's anyone in Washington who's going to pull back and say, hold it. This is going to be very dangerous. The Russians have drawn a red line. We really don't want to get into a shooting war with Russia. And there's no one around like that.
No, not at all. I mean, that's the shocking thing is people without any sense of restraint. And part of it is a function of how these people came to power currently. So many of them were tutored, not so much under the Obama administration. They really were the second tier people in the Obama administration. They came of intellectual age in the Clinton administration. And so people can go back and look at the disastrous policies in Eastern Europe and Russia during that time period. Look at how all of a sudden extreme poverty was going down. And then it's under the 90s, early 2000s that extreme poverty suddenly jumps back up in Eastern and Central Europe. The co-option by the Chinese ended up being a disaster on economic policy, on trade policy. But that's their mindset, and that's why it was so revelatory what happened in Anchorage, because not only American humiliated by the Chinese foreign staff on American soil, unheard of, unprecedented in American history. Maybe it would have happened in the 2nd century if America was around, but not now. But the other part was that they were completely unprepared for it. And it's because they truly don't understand the world out there. They don't realize it. They really live in such a tiny bubble that this is what happens when you create a tiny bubble, when you create a small group of people to have disproportionate power and influence, who further lives within a very limited life experience and limited sources of information that they trust. And this is a function of the whole censorship, big tech suppression by big media on behalf of deep state and economic actors that don't want these people to see independent information, so they don't have a Snowden problem of their own, right. People acting on their own conscience rather than just doing what they're told, is you get people that are badly, dangerously incompetent. I remember reading a lot of books in the buildup to World War I, and what was striking was a combination of arrogance and incompetence. They completely misread what was going to happen, completely misinterpreted what was going to happen. Yeah. And that disaster not only gave us a horrendous war with 16 million dead, half of whom civilians, it also really birthed both communism and fascism. We likely get neither without World War I. And unfortunately, that's who's running America right now, is people with that mindset.
No, that's a very good analogy, because it's all based on miscalculations. Miscalculations in Germany and Austria-Hungary about what Russia would do. They said, oh, Russia's not going to get into the war. Complete miscalculation. Then they miscalculated about England. England won't get into the war. I mean, it's really an extraordinary. And as you say, I mean, then you get communism, then you get Nazism, and World War II is basically just a rerun of World War I. I mean, it's just, it's World War I Part 2. So yeah, this is kind of what's happening here. I mean, you get Blinken, who goes and talks to the Chinese. The one thing the Chinese are absolutely adamant on, they will not brook interference in their internal affairs. You can raise other issues with them. You can raise trade issues, whatever, but you cannot raise Hong Kong, Taiwan, Tibet, none of these issues. They will not take it. I mean, this is, they guard their sovereignty jealously. And Blinken does this, and Blinken sort of brings this up with them. It's amazing how you can be that stupid.
And he really thought he was going to get cheered. I mean, that was the other thing. He was like, hey, the Americans are back. The leaders are back. The moral. They really had bought the New York Times headlines over the past 4 years that the rest of the world was feeling terrible about how America had this horrible Donald Trump in charge. And now that the Obama types were back in control, they were just going to be just like it was like George W. Bush about Iraq. He says they're going to be welcoming America. They're going to be waving our flag. They're going to be singing the national anthem. No, that isn't how that's going to turn out. And this is just a more egregious version of it. And that's why I say it's this sort of Victorian era imperial denialism of the way the world actually thinks of them, looks at them, and understands them. And the last time we had people with this much power be this divorced from reality with this self-righteous agenda, we got a world war that led to communism and fascism and another 100 million plus dead from those related issues. Right. So it is a terrifying time Hillary was more of a threat because Hillary believed in this, whereas, Biden's just waiting for cartoon time. Right. But this crowd, but the people around him really believe in it. Right. And that's what makes it terrifying.
It is, and it's a kind of an interesting thing because, again, if you look at the bubble in the U.S., they thought, oh, the rest of the world will be delighted, America's back and it's so wonderful. But in fact, the rest of the world didn't really look upon Donald Trump in the same way that America's elite looked on Donald Trump. There were plenty of countries that actually thought Trump was pretty decent. Russia, even to this day, they always speak well of him. Putin always says, very talented, very intelligent man, and Lavrov also says very talented, very intelligent. Then, you got the people in Korea, in Japan. I think the Chinese clearly much prefer dealing with Trump than with this crowd. So it's sort of, and now, we're seeing in the case of Ukraine, that the Europeans, Macron and Merkel, are really must be getting quite nervous about what the hell the Americans are doing, and that the Americans in alliance with the British are now seem to be egging on Zelensky in Ukraine, and an absolute disaster, which of course will then redound to Germany and to France. But you can say it's the rest of the world. The kind of thing. Well, at least with Trump, there was some rationality. There really isn't with these people.
Well, exactly. And I think they also disconnected sort of foreign press coverage and foreign public opinion amongst the broader public in those countries, which generally just doesn't know much anyway. So they just, whatever their press tells them, that's what they believe about a foreign leader. Whereas the foreign leadership class of those countries almost universally respected Trump, might have disagreed with him, might have wanted to, China wasn't happy that he was trying to meaningfully change the economic relationship between the two countries and was after him for that reason. But he was someone that they respected. Whereas they don't respect Biden's people at all. That's what they showed right away. Right. They had just contempt for Biden's people. Yep. That's why they bragged after the election about how they felt that they had basically, bought off the Biden crowd. They weren't hiding it because they're like, and it's partially because America's been kept in the dark press coverage wise, that China's economy is bigger than our economy now. Yeah. I'll talk about this with random people. Say, which a bigger economy, the U.S. or China? Most people say, oh, of course, the U.S. No, they passed us. Right. And there's all the reasons in the world to think they're going to keep passing us. Yep. And it's the whole reason why there really isn't a lot of Asian allies against China, because they need China more than they need us. Right. And this is not processed by a lot of people that try to stay kind of informed in America. Yeah. Most Americans don't know much about foreign policy beyond what they see in the press. It's not, it's not like they can sit around and study the right. International Herald Tribune each day or something. So and that's where the press gets away with a lot of stuff they couldn't get away with in other contexts. But the fact they had to cover up everything that happened in Anchorage was a sign that even they recognized, oh, that's not good. But I mean, look at who's covering the press. I mean, it's a bunch of kids, 25, 28-year-old kids who live on social media, who can't handle Glenn Greenwald exposing them now and then. So it's embarrassing what's going on. But I think we'll continue to see it. Domestic and foreign policy will both be a neoliberal for economic policy, but it will look different because they now believe in MMT. So the Larry Summers crowd is out. The new young professional Keynesian type, they see themselves as a Keynesian type personality. They're going to restructure the world the way Keynes did. Right. You're going to see a lot of exploration of MMT. That's why he'll propose tax increases that don't really work. The corporate tax structure doesn't work because you can't tax foreign corporate profits out of the U.S. In the modern global economy. Companies can just shop for the best tax haven. And they even know that. They're trying to pretend it's going to raise a bunch of money when it won't. And really what it is, it's just MMT. He's just going to print. And he'll call things infrastructure. Then you dig into the bill and it's like 90% of this isn't actual infrastructure. This is other things. They're going to do racial equity spending. So I mean, all kinds of things that sound deeply, it's a woke monetary agenda under MMT, but with a neoliberal tilt. So they won't be like real pro-labor. They'll be real slow to get around to those minimum wage increases. They'll be real slow to get around to those healthcare protections. What they will be doing is what MMT could do. How many votes can we buy without offending corporations? That's basically what they're going to do economically.
Yeah, well, infrastructure in general. I mean, this is just throw money at our political allies. Here's, I mean, once you're printing trillion, 2 trillion, 3, and it's all to, all the, the concrete barons, all the construction firms, without any idea of, well, I mean, that's very nice. You build a road, but, do we actually need this road going from this place to another place? Do we need these bridges? But I mean, once you're just throwing this money around, I mean, yeah, sure, we're going to build this bridge here and this road here, and then we've got to make sure that everything is, green friendly and so on. I mean, the thing about Trump is that Trump was a builder. I mean, he at least knew something about it. So if he puts forward an infrastructure plan, I mean, at least he has some idea. I mean, Biden and Harris have no idea about infrastructure. I mean, it just sounds so cool. Yeah, infrastructure, let's do it.
Well, and for Biden that's what his whole political machine background. Big spending plans is right up his alley. So even though it's not the sort of neoliberal corporatist agenda that he mostly served, it's his Democratic machine heritage, where that's how you kept the machine afloat. You made sure this politician got this much, that politician got that much. I mean, it's one huge trough for the pigs to come and feed at, and they're just going to funnel trillions into it. And they think they can get away with it because they think MMT is this economic theory that allows you to print out and inflate away your own debt and so forth. And that's the policy premise behind it that's the most problematic. But otherwise, you're right. It's going to be, they're just going to flood the system with money in ways that don't appear to be well directed and will almost invariably go to a lot of non-productive causes, roads to nowhere, things like that. There'll be a lot of that on the table. There'll be some good infrastructure, upgrading the trains, upgrading airports. These are things that needed to have been done 20 years ago. So that will be helpful. But a lot of the rest will all be big giveaways to select projects. And there'll be some random bridge in some random town that nobody ever uses because some politician got his beak wet that way.
Right. Now, the theory, however, is always that if you spend lots and lots of money, you get votes. So would that work? I mean, would it work at least in the midterms? They'll do well. People, hey, great, we've got some money in our pockets. And as for inflation, and everything else, that's just kicking the can down the road.
Well, definitely on the aspects of this plan and any future plan that involve Green New Deal stuff, that's all giveaways. I mean, Michael Moore did a documentary on how the whole Green New Deal related stuff is a scam. That the new energy, green energy, it's all one big. It doesn't actually achieve the environmental benefits that it claims to, even if you did believe in apocalyptic environmental theory, which people like Bjorn Lomborg and others have long refuted, even coming from the environmentalist centrist or left. But theoretically it does. But I don't know how much it translates. The old political machines, it was you delivered, and they made sure everybody in their all the way down to the precinct captain got his people jobs and money. Right. The machine is no longer that tight. Now it's very loose knit. It's more corporate people who line their own pockets, and they may be using illegal immigrant labor to get it done. So it's no longer as disciplined as it once was. And that's why I think what Biden, a good example is when New Deal to Great Society, New Deal worked politically. Didn't always really work economically, like people thought. The war did that. But the Great Society didn't really work politically. No. And aside being the education and health ones did, but not the direct spending because it became one of these woke agendas, the preview of wokeism. This little committee, that little committee, this little committee. And that's what I always describe these days. The Democratic Party is just giving more money and power to the professional managerial class to run your life, whether inside or outside. Right. So the degree to which they create a bunch of little mini agencies and mini 501c4 charities that direct, then it's just going to be one big scam that only enriches the professional class. So they'll get, they'll have guaranteed jobs. If you graduated with your philosophy degree from Tufts and you're really not that bright and you're really not that skilled, you'll get a job at some 501c4 making six figures, putting out government cash. So you're going to have a fair amount of that. But I don't think it will trickle down like he thinks it will to working class people. I don't think he's hoping he can buy off the construction unions and the other unions that are mad about shutting down the oil industry, shutting down the pipeline, shutting down natural gas. He's hoping he can buy them off by getting in these temp gigs, working on roads and bridges and other projects. But there's actually not enough money in there to achieve that. Yeah. And the system doesn't translate like that the way it used to. And at the same time, he's counteracting what he's doing by saying, hey, if you want to come to America, now's the time. And so we're going to get a flood of illegal labor. Yep. And that was very impactful in the construction industry and other industries across the country, especially. So I don't think it will translate to the kind of jobs and benefits politically he thinks it does.
No, that's a very good point. Your point about the LBJ's Great Society programs, why it was politically disastrous, because it wasn't like the New Deal. So the people who kind of benefited, well, they were like urban gangsters. I mean, this was money because there were also these kind of community building projects, which means, they just went to gangsters. So you had all these city mayors actually going to the White House and pleading with Johnson to stop this because, basically the cities were just becoming completely ungovernable with this, where this money was going. So 1968 was a political disaster for the Democrats. I mean, and Vietnam is only partially to explain that. So, I mean, where they were in 64 to the calamity of 68, I mean, that's a reflection of just how deeply the Great Society programs were rejected.
Completely. And I think, and Biden should remember that, but he's doubling down on it and going even further. I mean, when you're starting to do farmer proposals and you're going to say, I'm only going to give these money to black farmers. Okay. It's like, okay, well, one, you didn't prep the audience for that, but two, that's all people are going to remember. And that's going to antagonize a lot more people than you're going to gain. And so that kind of, if he does that, because that's what happened in the late 60s. I mean, the Black Panthers were genius. They figured out, I mean, a lot of the groups associate. I mean, the Crips were originally a radical, I think their actual name means like revolution and progress or whatever. They were smart. The gangsters are like, this is the best scam going. I just pretend to be this social work organization and I can hustle and extort these politicians into giving me a bunch of cash. Right. But everybody around could see it. And that's where like BLM, there's a reason why BLM is not rooted in the black church, not rooted in the black business community, opposed to both. Very similar to the Black Panthers in that respect. And that's why it backfired politically, even within large parts of the black community. Trump made massive inroads in the black community, biggest vote since Nixon 72. Right. And Nixon had been an original civil rights advocate, so he had a different kind of authority. And that's going to continue if they keep going down this path of weaponizing things that basically just empower either criminal gangsters or professional class librarian type personalities that get almost all the money and power while everyone else is left out.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So now we're going to maybe segue to Donald Trump. And I've noticed, and obviously you've noticed as well, that recently you have come under criticism. Now, to me, it seemed very unfair criticism, but some Trump supporters found you insufficiently supportive of Trump because you seem to be saying that Trump really is not handling the post-presidency well. So could you just elaborate on that? Is that your position, that he's not handling the post-presidency well?
No, I mean, and I think it's too, during the Trump era, he benefited from a deeply loyal base. And you need to have that base if you're going to be a populist challenger. And so I understand that they're reflexively loyal, but that's not useful for Trump. There need to be some portion of Trump people in his world that are populist first, Trump second, that see Trump as a very effective vehicle for at least some populist aspects, but have to recognize all the ways in which it failed to achieve what he was voted in to achieve and what he himself would. And a good example of that is his recent one. It was the most recent missive he's put out, complaining about people he put in power. Right. So as I tell people, you don't have to take my word for how many bad people Trump hired. Just listen to how Trump describes them. Right. Nobody forced him to take John Bolton. Nobody forced him to have the Pompeo. Nobody forced him to have Tillis. Nobody forced him to have Mattis. Nobody forced him to have Coates. I mean, on and on and on. Hasper at the CIA. Right. And the latest one was he was like, look at how bad Birx and Fauci are. Yeah. Some of us said that at the time. You were the one who promoted him and put him in for press conferences. Right. And he had a lame excuse at the end. At least it's showing he's getting some feedback. Some of the feedback that I and other people are putting out there is getting back to him. Because he was like, yeah, maybe I should have fired him, but I didn't, they were long-term employees. That was like, that's a lame excuse. Right. So there were critical Achilles heels problems with Trump, such that Trumpism did not result in what Trump himself said he wanted to achieve, and definitely what his voters thought he was going to achieve. He should have been out of Syria by now. Yep. He should have been out of Afghanistan by now. He should have reduced troop levels. He should have gone through with pulling out of NATO. NATO's an irrelevant agency. He was right. Stick with it. All it does is it's just a trigger for war. NATO is today what the treaties prior to World War I were. That's all they are. An excuse to get us involved in some stupid war. And it's what we promised the Russians when we said, hey, you give up the Soviet Union. Don't worry. We won't expand NATO to your border. Yeah, NATO won't even have a purpose anymore. I mean, we broke that promise in years. But then people wonder, why don't people trust America overseas? Long history of lying. There are areas where his instincts are really good, but he put terrible people around him. They sabotaged his campaign. They sabotaged his efforts to get any remedy in the post-election contest about the campaign. They set him up for another bogus impeachment. And now he's been mostly ineffective. It's like his grand plan was to just go back on Fox, which appears to be the case, given that his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, now is going to work at Fox. Right. Wow, I guess you showed Fox, didn't you, Trump? Fox showed you. They could smack you around and you'd come back to heel. And that's what happened. Yep. And the reason why that happened is because he has almost no supporters around him. Some of the Trump world people would say, look, he's still the best in the business. He's still the best advocate for populist causes out there. I agree entirely. There's nobody that's come close to replacing him at this point. People on the left that could have been good voices have been totally co-opted. Bernie is, looking at house number 4, and AOC can't wait for a new Instagram hit. Yep. So these are people who are not going to be anywhere near populist causes anytime soon. You have some people good in the public opinion space, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, Matt Taibbi, Michael Tracy, that are even being more proactive and more aggressive, recognizing the real threat that Bidenism poses. Greenwald always understood. Yep. Biden, the Obama world was a greater threat to peace and freedom and liberty than Trump world ever was, even though he strongly disagreed with Trump on many things. Right. He had clear eyes about that because he's followed it long enough. Yes. Trump continues to underachieve what could be the case. And if he were reelected right now, he would make all the exact same mistakes he made before. Right. He would not fix a thing because he hasn't fixed the thing. He's got a bunch of people around him that are incompetent, incapable, that sabotaged him through the campaign, sabotaged him after the campaign, and he's putting them in charge of who he's going to endorse. Right. So I think the only thing he'll be real effective at, aside from some very funny occasional press releases, like, where is John Huber? Is this actual real human being? Or maybe this is a fake person. That's the great side of Trump, the humorous side of Trump. And I hope he does some other stuff and monetizes his brand, but it's not been an impressive start in his post-presidential era. But he looks more like William Jennings Bryan after losing in 1896 than Andrew Jackson after losing in 1824.
But the interesting is, let's look at like Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon did build a team of people around him. I mean, like, obviously Pat Buchanan. I mean, he picked Pat Buchanan very early on in the 1960s as his kind of attack dog and stuck with him for years. But the so-called Berlin Wall that surrounded him, these were his people. In the end, of course, they didn't serve him well, but he knew what he was doing. He needed his people, his team around him, and not to get sucked into Washington. And look, I mean, he hired Kissinger. He knew Kissinger was very loyal to him, and that Kissinger would help him get around the bureaucracy. I mean, everything Nixon did was basically he got around the bureaucracy. I mean, he sent Kissinger on secret missions. He negotiated with the Russians through Kissinger. So he didn't trust anyone within the bureaucracy. Now, Trump just doesn't have that kind of a sophistication. He doesn't have that sort of understanding of that's what you have to do in government, because otherwise you're going to hire all these Tillersons and Kellys and Boltons and all these people who've been around for years. They served Clinton, they served Bush, they served Obama. They're not going to be loyal to your agenda.
Yeah, I mean, the Supreme Court, he's condemning as cowards. The main cowards were the three people he put on the bench. And I haven't seen any, what I wanted to see was some degree of reflection as to where he made mistakes. And even if, because it's not in Trump's nature to admit mistakes, but he will do so indirectly by changing something he's done from what he's done in the past. And I'd hope that we would see different people appointed to his inner circle. And we did not. Then he wasn't even active on all the election reform laws. Didn't say a word about any of them anywhere. Now, what he's obsessed with getting back at people who voted for his impeachment. Okay, that's fine. But I mean, that can't be the only thing, because he starts to look like a caricature. If 6 months from now, he's still complaining about the election and still talking about people who voted for him against him on impeachment, he looks like the caricature of him as a petty, vindictive, personal, obsessed individual who only cares about himself and doesn't care about the broader public. And he starts to play into that stereotype. I don't think that's who he is, but he looks that way if he keeps going that route. And that's where, when he had people also underappreciate, he had great advisors in the build up to 2016. Not only Steve Bannon at the end, but before that, not only Roger Stone, but Sam Nunberg, people who only listened to the populist talk radio in the United States, places like Alex Jones, places like that. That's why Trump was so ahead of the curve on all these core issues. That was totally unlike anything he'd ever talked about really before. You go back to before 2012, you don't see Trump talking about immigration, building a wall. Now, he's always had the same instincts on trade, always had the same instincts on war. And those were his two great political instincts. Yeah. But on all these other issues, Common Core education, Trump didn't have it. And being pro-life and being all about the Bible, that's not really Trump's life history. These were great, but they were because he had people who had their ear to the ground. Now he's still reading the New York Times obsessively. It's like, why? The New York Times is a complete joke now. It's not the gray lady of journalism. It's the dead lady of journalism. Yep. Why care what some 26-year-old wokester thinks about you? So what? Right. I mean, the New York Times has lost all of its weight around the world. It's no longer respected internationally in elite circles. So why pay attention to it now? So he needs people to push back, because it's the only way he hears. Now that he's not on social media, he doesn't get anywhere near the net level of pushback he needs. And honestly, some of us were probably too quiet during the administration. We would say things behind the scenes and they just never worked. And if you look at Trump historically, it's the people who came up and slapped him in the face who actually got rewarded in the end. Newt Gingrich didn't get a job. Rudy Giuliani didn't get a job. Chris Christie even didn't get a job. Whereas people like Ken Cuccinelli, who tried to make sure he couldn't even be nominated and tore up his thing on the floor, he got a prime gig. Trump did this over and over and over and over again. Right. And so he needs, one rule in politics is you need your allies and loyal people and two, you need reciprocal loyalty. This is what a lot, Nixon and others, Kennedys, they all understood. You need to be key. Look, this is what the Clintons were good at doing and why they built that political machine. You build loyalty to you by being loyal to those key people at key times. And Trump failed that test when he let Flynn go to the wind. And then they took out all of Flynn's people. Yep. They waited for Flynn to name all the people he wanted. And then they made sure because I represented some of them, they made sure all of them know, you better keep your head low or you're next. And that's all on Trump. Trump made tons of mistakes. He hasn't come to terms with those mistakes. He keeps repeating them. So that's going to limit his ability to be an effective populist advocate in time. Right.
No, that's right. And your point about Fox News is absolutely spot on, because remember, it was Fox News that screwed him over on election night, where, with that whole thing with Arizona, when they called it, never really explained how, and remember, not just that, you remember, they initially projected that the Democrats would win 20 to 25 seats in the House. And I'm not even saying initially, this was already some hours after the polls closed. They were predicting this. That's Fox News. And now what he's now going on, giving these interviews back on that Fox News morning show, gives interviews there. giving interviews to Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham insulted him. I mean, remember, I mean, I don't know if you saw this, it was about a week or so ago. He was talking about the election and about how the Supreme Court, you know, let us down and everything. Well, we're not going to relitigate the election. You know, you should have had a better legal strategy during the election aftermath. So that's it. So what happened to all the, he was going to set up a new media, you know, he was going to a rival to Twitter and all of that. You know, you're back with Fox News. I mean, it really does look like he hasn't learned anything.
Yeah, completely. And all he's doing is putting out these like little press releases. He hopes get broad coverage. He has people around him choosing people to nominate that are often people that have fought him all the way through. And he's talked about creating a completely new social media platform, but that's unlikely to work. He would have been much better off, locals, other one, Gab, Telegram, finding someone else to work with, Parler, monetizing their brand with his brand with their name, and being able to send traffic that way, but not get involved in actually trying to recreate something from scratch that's going to take years to develop, that's going to be a target of every kind of legal threat known to man because it's his personally. That doesn't even make sense. And that's why it has looked like a half-ass operation. Right. And unfortunately, that's kind of like Trump's a seat of his pants guy. But the way he was successful before was having key people around him in key spaces that really understood the lay of the land, that could make sure his skill set, his marketing, branding, communicative, persuasive skill set would be best used. And especially once I saw Laura Trump was going to be on Fox and did a deal with Fox, I was like, oh, so that means he's not even going to another network. He's not even going to promote another network much.
Right.
So that means, he was talking with Roger Ailes about that before Roger Ailes died all the way back in 2016. In fact, there was the contingency plan in case he lost. Hannity had already agreed to walk other people. I've just seen no evidence that he's really taking, not only is he not getting better sources of information, he's back to some of his worst sources of information. He's not monetizing his brand or leveraging his persuasive power anywhere near could be effective in a wide range of contexts, nominating context, party building context, and in the independent media infrastructure he could be supporting that he's really not.
So I think on one show you were saying that he was somehow engineer some sort of a merger. I'm not truly understand exactly what you were arguing. A merger between, say, Newsmax and OAN and some other outlets, and that could be his brand. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. What people had proposed to him, and I thought he was considering this, and I think he was, and then he's got bad advisors, was basically a delivery mechanism for independent news that would be his branding approved. So I was going to call it Trump TV is what, or other people were talking about calling it. It's basically like that Amazon Fire Stick, but it's a way to get around all of the various censors and suppressors, put all of the alternative populist news sources outside of censor control in one location that you could order for like $99.99, plug it into your computer, plug it into your smart TV, plug it into you could have a box that plays into the TV, so that you could see all these independent news, create true technological infrastructure for easy, quick delivery of independent information. Have all of those people pay him a certain percentage of money, or they simply agree to be on the stick in exchange for him getting all the profits from selling the stick, and basically create an Amazon Fire Stick of alternative information. With and you could even make it specific for the Christian family crowd. They might want one thing, popular side might want, gamer crowd might want something else. So you've got these big audiences with a big appetite for independent information. They would like it to be a one-stop shop. They see what's happening with all the social media censorship, internet censorship. Why not hand deliver that to them and make money off of it while branding it without having to create your own platform totally from scratch? And then you could use that delivery mechanism as a way for direct advertising, direct marketing, all kinds of things. And I thought he could probably get 75 million people to buy in. Because it had that potential. He could do it where it's cheaper than traditional access of cable and other components. And One American News Network it's sort of your own Apple box. That's another way to think of it. Your own little Apple box, Apple TV. And it could be a delivery mechanism for everything, but including independent news and information. And his branding would get a lot of people interested to buy it. And then it would be a way to down the road you want direct advertising to your people, you just send it to them right on that box. You just hit a little, they have the little thing there. And so it'd be a way to get around all the Facebook censorship, YouTube censorship, even cable news censorship, to make sure at least his group knew his message. It's like a direct mail every day, except on your TV. And I thought he was going to pursue it. Other people that were around him, because it fits so many things.
Right.
Instead, he's totally on a different. Somebody came to him as a scam artist or grifter and said, "Hey, Trump, you can replace Twitter. You can replace Facebook. We'll create Trump book. It will be huge." Not telling him there's almost no chance of that working.
Right. But you see, I mean, what he's doing now just makes very little sense, because he's now at the mercy of Fox News. So he's at the mercy of, Laura Ingraham will have me on, and then have her insult him, or, we'll have Hannity. But Hannity always has his own agenda. Hannity doesn't really even care what Trump is saying. Hannity is just so eager to put his own nonsense out. So and Fox will do the same thing to him again, what they did during the election. I mean, they have no loyalty to him. I mean, they never liked him. And they'll be more than happy to screw him over again. So it just makes no sense for him to be, once again, basically, using Fox as his exclusive mechanism to getting his message out.
He should just be paying attention to what's happening to Matt Gaetz, because there's clearly a coordinated effort to take out Gaetz. And Gaetz was probably the closest, most high-profile public congressional Trump ally that existed. He was seen, I know this from high financial circles in the United States, political financial circles, he was seen as the next Trump. There were people who are going to be organizing to back him running for state office, then to governor, then to the White House. They saw him as someone who could actually deliver on Trumpism, because he understood all the things that Trump didn't, and about how politics really works. Now, it turns out maybe he underestimated. I was always curious, his confidence at going after the deep state. And I was like, your personal life better be in perfect position. You better, be able to survive under this little microscope. Otherwise, you are in trouble. Yep. And it looks to me, it does look like it's a deep state hit job. Yep. But I think this is also another subtle message to Don Jr., because Don Jr. is the smartest political guy in the entire Trump family orbit by a long mile. Laura Trump is probably the most naturally charismatic, but Don Jr. is the one who gets it, who tracks a wide range of information. But the way they're going after Gaetz, I mean, to say, he had a 17-year-old girlfriend who traveled once, who he paid for the travel expenses, and now that equals sex trafficking? Right. Like he's Epstein? And it's like, one, being 17 is of age in a whole bunch of states, just not in Florida. Absolutely. Most of the world, it's of age. So it's a kind of weird age to focus on. I mean, put it this way. I know that happens a lot in the United States, and I've never heard of the FBI investigating it before.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, the DOJ was investigating a 17-year-old. You mean there's nothing else on, no other pressing issues? They're investigating that he's having an affair with a 17-year-old girl. And as you say, I mean, 17 is not a child. I mean, it's an absurdity.
It's the age of consent in many of the states of our own country and throughout the world. This happens not in Florida, unless you're 17 and he's like 19. They have one of the Romeo and Juliet kind of rules.
Right.
So I get why it's a political problem for him, but the idea that would ever be elevated to federal criminal investigation is very weird. Right. And then that it magically ends up with the kind of outside James Ellroy type characters you get in a James Ellroy, like American tabloid novel, where you have these ex-federal prosecutors, old FBI investigators, and then they manage to be connected to Levinson and Mueller and Iran. It's like, This is like right out of it's like a combination of a James Ellroy, Elmore Leonard novel. They're like half incompetent criminals, half deeply corrupt criminals. But like, what's the chance that this doesn't have, well, it has deep state fingerprints all over.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing with Levinson, because that kind of brings back memories of Russiagate and how Mueller had asked Deripaska, who was a friend of what was his name? Manafort. He was Manafort. A friend of the So he had asked him to shell out some money of his own to find Levinson, and now we're back again, and this guy. This Florida lawyer, he's the lawyer for the Levinson family. He really is. And it's the same cast of characters popping up.
And some of this seems like a lot of grifting going on. Like I remember people had come to me years ago at the Levinson thing, and they were wanting some sort of legal investigation. And the sense I got out of it was people were hustling people for all kinds of cash to fine Levinson, and it wasn't clear that money ever went to actually fine Levinson.
Right.
And it seemed pretty obvious what had happened with Levinson. You know, CIA sends him to spy in Iran, gets caught. Well, you probably don't come home happy. So the idea that there were 12 years later we're still searching for the guy. It seems like, and then these guys end up somehow connected to the Matt Gaetz thing, which tells me maybe they were the ones to initially report this information to the FBI. Because it's one of the oldest scams. You report something to the FBI to investigate, then you go and extort the guy saying, hey, I found this out and I can get you. By the way, someone who used to do that were people right close to Biden. When Biden was vice president, people close to him repeatedly pitched clients of mine that if certain donations were made on behalf of Biden, Biden would make sure criminal cases would go bye-bye. Now, I kept all my clients 10 miles away from it, so I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But that gives you an idea for the reputation Biden had, that you could have high-end lawyers making that pitch. Right. And you're like, whoa, something is AWOL. The degree of Biden's corruption is just, it's at a different level. It's really even beyond the Clintons. The Clintons were more pernicious about it, but Biden is just more openly corrupt. Yes. This is one of those people that really will do anything for money or a kickback or a trade deal. I mean, the kid is truly, Hunter is a chip off the old block in more ways than one.
Right. That's right. And it's the entire Biden family, because, you're talking about his brothers and they're all basically been living off the fat of the land for years. I mean, they've all been living off Biden, the senator, and he's been getting them all these wonderful perks. It's an amazingly sleazy criminal. I don't know if it's criminal, but it's a sleazy, corrupt enterprise. But if you just go back to Gaetz, when you say, if you're going to take on the deep state, and he was a very strong anti-interventionist. He really was strong. It wasn't like some of the Republicans who pretend to be anti-interventionist, if it's a Democrat war or something, but he was really anti-interventionist. You better be bloody sure that your life is absolutely spotless, because they're going to come after you. And I don't know anything about his life, but it does look like they have some stuff on him. He does seem to be dating an awful lot of very young women.
That's what it appears to be, at least, that he must have had that reputation. Right. And then they must have been tracking him. Because I'm curious, because it doesn't sound to me like anybody, like that the girlfriend was the source of any complaint. Right. And that suggests somebody was tracking his credit card records. Somebody was tracking his travel records. Someone was checking who was being booked in under certain things. So that shows all the signs of government scam kind of corrupt investigation. But especially, I didn't know his father was as wealthy as he was. If I would have been him, my dad's independent. Basically, he was set up to be another Kennedy type. Independent wealth, so he doesn't need the system's money. Right. Independent beliefs, willing to advocate for them no matter the consequences. Right. And if that's the only thing with those guys is they do tend to be incredibly naive. It's why they do what they do. Right. Like even Trump to this day has this weird naive streak. Right. No, these people won't do that to me. Of course they're going to do that to you. But Gaetz, I think also part of his populism was, hey, this is just obviously true, and not thinking about if this is true, that means something about the people who would like to not see you develop your career any further. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a concern for him, but we'll see how it's one of the craziest stories ever.
Yeah, no, I think it's a shame. He was really one of the up and coming talents. He looked like a worthy successor to a kind of a populist movement, the successor to Trump. So I think it's a great shame if this is and what he did to Liz Cheney was just terrific, to go up to Wisconsin and address a rally against Liz Cheney. So it'd be unfortunate if this is.
I think I'll give him credit for saying he's going to go after everybody he thinks is coming after him. Right. And the fact that he's got the resource to do so, maybe they'll reconsider the scope to which they do what they did. But I think that's how I interpreted the whole Tucker thing, even though I thought he made strategic mistakes about how he addressed it. Tucker never likes being brought into the conversation. yeah, even when Tucker fairly could be brought into the because Tucker has been repeatedly, there were sexual harassment charges from 2 years ago that were completely bogus, but Tucker has had to deal with this kind of thing over and over again. But I understand but it was a mistake of Gaetz, but it was revelatory of Gaetz. Gaetz thinks in terms of loyalty. You should be on my side, so you're going to come to my defense. These people are out to get me, so I'm going to pay them back. Right. But it shows that that's a good instinctive Kennedy-like skill set to have. Right. So if he can survive this, it tells me he's got an even brighter future than I thought. The key is if he can survive it, because his mistake was not just saying, oh, no, it's not true. Never had a 17-year-old girlfriend. It didn't pay for travel expenses. And this is part of a scam to screw me over. And I would have put, he hinted at deep state, but he's being very personal. He's like, it's this person, I'm going for them. This person, I'm going for them. This person, I'm going for them. But that is the right political instinct to have. What Trump failed to do was punish his adversaries. Right. His adversaries got reward, and it hurt him in his foreign policy, because the Chinese can watch what would happen. Like, okay, you're not really going to do what you're saying you're going to do, because those people smacked you in the face and you rewarded them. Right. So at least Gaetz has the right instinct about that aspect.
Right. So what do you think Trump is now going to do? I mean, is he going to go back to holding rallies? Or, I mean, this what he's doing now isn't working. So he's got to come up with some new plan, because, you know, the idea of just doing these odd interviews on Fox or sending out this press releases, I mean, that isn't working for him. So what do you think he's actually going to do now?
I think he's currently just looking at which people to challenge, what missive I mean, right now he's still in the same mindset. I don't think he appreciates the fact that this is not working, because the problem is he doesn't have the feedback. He doesn't have the feedback. Like, he learned that endorsing Luther Strange was backfiring when he went to Alabama and realized that, oh, nobody here has any interest in my big Luther nonsense. Right. And he just dropped it, dismissed it, moved on. But if he's not out and about making speeches and talking and, you know, testing his audience with his ideas, and he's not directly have his own media network, have his own direct communication, have some sort of something like that where he's able to do direct delivery of his message without it trying to make it a Facebook kind of thing, then I think he's in the same mire that he's in now. And unfortunately, right now, that there's not enough. He's still not hearing enough, so that he gets he's so cocooned. There's almost nobody other than Don Jr. who's giving him this feedback. Everyone else is, patting him on the back while they, you know, sabotage him as soon as they go out. Right. I mean, he's writing paychecks to people who spent the last year bad-mouthing him behind the scenes. I mean, it's sad to witness, but it's what's happening. Right. Now, the other thing is he has business problems. He needs to refurbish the brand. I don't think he'll ever be able to really fully get to where he was, because there's certain people that will hate him now politically forever. But there are a lot of people in the business space saying he needed to pay more attention if he wanted to revive the business brand. I don't think he really cares about the business brand much anymore. What he needs to do is what works. Get really smart people around him. Find a way to monetize his brand with direct access media, direct access, social media, whatever it is, and get back out on the speaking tour kind of combination. And like, he could have done this during the election litigation, legal issues, the legislation changes. Okay. He could have gone to Georgia, held a rally, said, hey, Georgia, hold the line. Make sure you don't allow no excuse mail-in balloting forever. Right. I don't think he even knows the law passed. Right. I mean, that's where I was on a conference call with a bunch of election lawyers fighting HR 1. There was nobody from Trump world. So he's in his own cocoon in Mar-a-Lago, nursing grievances over what happened, understandably, but too distracted by that to be proactive and productive right now. And he thinks that he can just he thinks what worked in 2016 was him doing round robin interviews on the press. He doesn't fully understand what actually worked in 2016, because he won't give credit to other people. That's a weakness of his in the political arena. Right. And so he thinks that, if I just appear on Fox once everybody's going to love it. It's going to be great. I'm going to still dominate. So he doesn't realize that won't work long term. Right.
But he's also got a problem that the media are not going to, I mean, they're absolutely now determined to say, we're not going to do anything at all for him. We're not going to give him any publicity. We're not going to give him any oxygen. We're just going to ignore him. So it's not just the social media, but it's, you know, all the networks. So that's a real problem, because in 2016, you know, the media loved him. I mean, it was just good entertainment. But now they're just not going to do it. They're not going to play that game. So he's got that additional problem to deal with, and as we've just been discussing, Fox News isn't going to be batting for him either. So
exactly.
yes,
Well, that's why I say it's very much the two great precedents for this are Andrew Jackson had the election stolen from in 1824. Because key people came to Andrew Jackson with the idea, he spent the interim 4 years building the Democratic Party that has lived to this day. A lot of the revolutions in political advertising and the rest all happened from Andrew Jackson's 1828 campaign. The flip side, though, is William Jennings Bryan. He sort of went into a hole, sort of nursed his grievances, didn't make institutional reforms, didn't make changes in infrastructure, and he became sort of the guy who had an election stolen from him, and that was that. He would never be elected. He would run. He would get nominated just like Trump can, but he would never win because he didn't fix the institutional infrastructure problems of a lasting political movement. Right. And it can't just be Trump's name and Trump doing sporadic media interviews and press releases. But I don't think he fully understands that yet.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you so much, Robert. That was thank you for your time. A lot of fascinating points, and hope we'll be back soon. Remember, the Gaggle is now on Rumble. Look us up on Rumble, and if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.